Man, won't you be seated this morning? Well, it's great, as I said, to have Pastor Chris and Karrie Duncan here, their son Gabriel, or Gabe, he doesn't mind either one. But we're excited to be able to have them come. Last time they were here was about 2 years ago, and in that moment they were raising funds to kind of remodel a facility to be able to meet in. They had outgrown their last facility. They were running a little over 100 people at that time, and so it's always neat to see what God is doing now. So within those 2 years, if you follow them on social media, this won't be a surprise to you. But if you don't, this is just a neat blessing to see what God has been doing the last 2 years. Their church, God has been moving in their location. They're in the mall, the lower level of a mall. And so whenever you go to the mall, you see their church. And in this setting, in this lower setting where they have remodeled, God has blessed from a little over 100 to a little over 500 now. They've gone from one service to 4 services every Sunday morning. And so Chris is a very busy man, as is Karrie. And so we're excited to see what God is doing. We're just thankful for what God is doing. It's neat to see him moving in a very Muslim, Buddhist environment that God is blessing this church. And so I want you to be in prayer for Chris as he comes. Chris is very special. Chris, Wesley, Christy, and I, we all kind of grew up at Concord Elementary together and at the church here together. And so it's just neat to see how God is moving with those that are in my peer group, which now we're 42 now, guys. And so that's a great year. But it's just neat to see what God has done in their lives and what he continues to do. And so won't you be in prayer for Chris as he comes. Chris, won't you come and share with us this morning?
All right. Thanks so much. Man, we're so happy to be here. I'm always happy to be back here. It's exciting to see old friends, and I don't mean old because we're 42, as Pastor Jonathan mentioned, but it's just good to be here and good to see all of you guys. And like he said, especially exciting to come and share about what you guys have been investing in, and especially having stood up here 2 years ago and going into renovating a facility to move a church into, and then now we need to move again. We need to add more space because we've filled it up. I don't know how many more times than 4 times a Sunday I can preach, because the fourth one I start to lose my voice already. But just to let you know that what you gave, and it was substantial last time we were here, and it really made a difference. I mean, you made space for people to come in and get to know God, and it is filled up. I mean, every week. I mean, there's people. I don't want to get ahead of myself because we want to share more about this, but we have people coming in one service, and we've had to instruct our greeters to ask them if they don't mind coming back to the next service, and they come back. So they're hungry. They want to hear about God. They want to know Him. Even people contact us that are still Muslim or still Buddhist and saying, "Hey, can I come to the church? I'm not a Christian." And we say, of course. I mean, we feel like the best place for them to be is with us. And they have a chance to be introduced to Jesus, and they do get to know Him, and we get to baptize them, and more often than not, then they join our team. So my wife, Karrie, is here with me today. So we wanted to just share with you together, if that's okay, because I just want to share what God's doing and what He's doing in Indonesia, what He's done in our life, more the process and the things we go through, so you can know that and I think it will relate to things you go through in your life and what God's doing. And we just want to share from our hearts this morning. So I have a problem of talking too much, so I'm going to just every once in a while, maybe she'll give me a sign to stop talking.
Well, we are so excited to be here with you. We're from this area. This is our hometown. A lot of our family are from Rock Creek even. I was born and raised in Hueytown, and so coming back is always it just feels so great. We've been serving overseas in Indonesia for 15 years now. We have 4 children. Our daughter, Savannah, is 24. She's married, and her husband are living in Springfield, Missouri. We have 3 boys. Isaiah, last time we were here, he was just graduating. He was just leaving us in Indonesia and coming back here. And now he just graduated from Highlands College, and just got hired on like 2 weeks ago with a local church planting organization here in Birmingham. And then we have our third child, Nehemiah, which he goes by Nemo. He just graduated high school, but he's agreed to stay another year with us. We call it a gap year because, you know, when your kids start to grow and leave, we're more and more reluctant to let them go. So we're like, Nemo, you can stay with us. There's no rush to go back home. So
we really pushed the gap year. We've told Gabe he never has to leave. So.
Isaiah actually spent a gap year after he graduated with us because I think he felt sorry for us because the ministry was so busy and he felt bad to leave. Maybe Nemo feels the same thing. We'll just keep making him feel bad and he'll maybe never leave.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm just saying. But and then we have Gabriel, our son. He's 10 years old and he's starting 5th grade in 2 more weeks. But we are just really excited to be here with you. We are from here. We consider we're Alabama people, and even though you know our second home is Indonesia, and the more we're there and then we come back here, the more we realize we really don't know who we are anymore, you know, because just the more we come home and we see our kids and seeing how they're becoming more and more Indonesian, even though we're not realizing it. But it's great, always great to come back home, and we do feel like that God's given us a message today, and we just want to share our hearts, and we want to share some of our story and our lives with you, and pray that it will bless you today.
Yeah. So, Pastor Jonathan, thanks so much for the invitation to be here. As Karrie said, we've ministered in Indonesia for 15 years, but the last, I would say, 4.5 years have been so different. God had put something in our heart. He gave us a vision of something that he wanted us to do back in 2006, and it took a long time. How many of you, like me, have had those times where God teaches you patience? It's our favorite, isn't it? You know, where you feel like something's about to happen, and then you wait and wait. This church was like that, and I'm going to share more about that, but it was 4.5 years ago when we started the journey to plant the church, and we started a small group in our home, and it grew, and we had 30 people, and they helped us plant the church. And 2 years ago when we were here, we had grown to about 150 people. We were meeting in a movie theater. There was no more space, so we needed to move out. And now I just got the report from the service. It happened our Saturday night. We're 12 hours behind, so Indonesia's in the future. They already had church. They've already had lunch. They could tell us what the options are after church, but we had 568 people in service. It's hard to say, last night. I don't know how to say that, but Sunday service. And man, it's hard leaving them. Could you imagine as the pastor leaving for 3 months? You know, normally as missionaries, we come home for a full year and raise our support, but pastoring the church, we can't leave for a year. So we've worked out a plan that every 2 years we leave for 3 months, which is still difficult enough. I have an assistant that works with us. His name is Adam. He's from Aniana, and so he's a 27-year-old guy, great guy, and I just left the entire church in his hands. So I'm like, hey, at least let it be like this when I get back. Try to grow it, if you can. Try to reach more people, and he's a great guy. But seeing what God has done, and honestly, it has nothing to do with us other than just being faithful to what God called us to do. I'm no master church planter. I'm not, any of you, I don't even have to tell Jonathan and Wesley and Christy this stuff. They know that. But just being faithful when God gives you a vision and just sticking it out, even if it's years and years. So we want to talk to you this morning about vision, about purpose, about the plan that God has for you. Because if you stick with it, whatever it is, God's going to bless it. We believed what he told us. We went to do it, and he blessed the work beyond what I feel like we did with our hands. It was beyond what we could imagine. And I was just thinking about this word vision and what God can do with that. Vision has several different definitions, I guess, like maybe seeing something, maybe something supernaturally, or you have some kind of vision. People might talk about that sort of thing. Then there's also just vision that is the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom. I think I want to sort of combine these two, because when God gives us vision, it is a supernatural thing. It's a divine thing. He gives us vision, and we sort of get a spoiler of what he wants to do in the future, sort of an idea of where he wants to take us and what he wants to do in our life. And then we get to be a part of that. We get to be a part of what he called us to do. I was thinking about the church. Just recently, we had church bombings in Indonesia. And, there's times where you have this vision of a church and what you want, and then things go on in your life that, wow, this doesn't really fit the happy vision. We'll plant a church, we'll reach people for Jesus. Then churches are being bombed. Hey, how does this fit in the vision? I remember sitting there that Sunday morning, and my phone's going off, and I'm seeing like people are saying churches are being bombed, and we're in the middle of the first service. We've got 3 more services that Sunday. And then you have the thoughts, okay, I've never thought about what you do in this case. I don't know if they teach us that in seminary. If other churches start getting bombed, here's the plan, We're just sitting there like, man, God, this is your vision. You called us to do this. This is all in your hands. And just having to trust God, and we were okay. And the exciting thing about that, I thought, man, that would really spook people off from coming to church. Our church, like was mentioned, is in the bottom of the mall. It's kind of like when you pull into the parking garage. It's not prime real estate, but it's what we could get, right? The thing we love about it, though, is when you drive down, it's all glass window. So Karrie will share more later, but this term going back, we thought we want to give it all. We don't want to hide out down in the basement. No one know there's a church. It's a Muslim nation. We know those things, but we wanted to give it all. It's all or nothing. So we have a huge church banner there, the times and everything. Normally that's awesome, because everyone that enters the mall sees, hey, there's a church here. That's why so many people pop in. Some people tell us, well, we just came for lunch and saw there's a church and some activity going on. We wanted to come and look. It looked like fun. People having coffee in the lobby and things. After the church bombings, I was like, man, I don't really like sitting behind this big glass window anymore that everyone can drive past. We hired a security guard, this big Muslim guy. He's too smiley. I told Pastor Jonathan earlier, you want the security guy to be intimidating. He's got the size to be intimidating, but he smiles so much. He looks like a big teddy bear. He's actually more like he's joined our greeter team. When I walk up and I want to see him standing there looking mean, he's holding the door open and smiling and welcoming people in. Like this Muslim guy, it's awesome. I remember I kept forgetting during Ramadan because he was fasting. We weren't. And we have coffee in the lobby, and I kept saying, hey, Pac, do you want some coffee? He's like, I'm fasting. I'm like, oh, man, I would feel so bad. But we all of these things that are involved in being a part of a church there. And even after the bombings, people kept coming, and people kept being saved. Muslims are coming. Buddhists are coming. People that are far from God. Even just recently, people that are giving us messages saying, hey, I was thinking about suicide, but now I feel like I have purpose. We've gotten at least 3 of those recently. Some guy texted me right before I left. He was concerned that I was leaving because he said, Pastor, I've been thinking about suicide, and I finally have a purpose in my life. So I told him, hey, talk to Pastor Adam. I'm leaving, but someone's there, and God's working these things out. I want to talk to us about vision, because all of this is based around the vision that God gives us. And I want to share with you, Karrie and I, about our vision, what God's given us, the vision of this church, how you guys have been a part of that, and then encourage you in the vision that God has for you. Because I believe every single person in this room, God has a vision for you, for your life, for your family, for your children, for your grandchildren, for your ministry. There's a vision for this church. Your pastor has a vision. Everything is involved around vision, and it's so important. When I think about someone in the Bible that had vision, I think about Joseph. Joseph, that was the younger brother. He had all of these older brothers, and God gave Joseph a vision, a dream. He showed him something of the future. Joseph didn't really know how to handle it that well. You know, I mean, you know the story that this little brother's basically telling his older brothers, one day you're going to bow down to me. Any of you have little brothers? I do. If my brother told me that, I wouldn't have sold him into slavery, but I would have done something to him. So you can imagine this guy, Joseph, he has this vision. God basically shows him as a young person, you're going to be a great leader someday. And he has this vision. And when we read Genesis, his story starts in Genesis 37. We see everything was built on this vision that God placed in his heart as a young teenager. Everything. He was able to make it through everything he faced, and we'll look at more of that. But all because, man, I've got a vision in my heart. God's placed something there. There's a purpose for my life. We see times where basically it's like, I can't give up now. I'm doing something. I can't be made afraid. There's nothing that can happen in this life that can keep me from fulfilling this vision that God's given to me. And we see that for Joseph. So the first point I want to give you, Karrie and I just have three simple points for you, but just good reminders. The first one is ask God for a vision. If you're sitting here and you're thinking, man, I don't know what that vision is, just ask God for it. Ask God for a vision. A quote that I read recently says, a man without a vision will always return to his past. And I think that's so true. How many of you, even in your Christian life, I remember early on being a Christian, it felt like a cycle. Have you ever been like that? Man, I'm on fire for God. I'm living for Him. I want to do something for Him. Fall back into sin. I'm depressed. I feel ashamed. I feel guilty. And now I'm on fire for God. And you know, we have these cycles. If you feel like you're in a cycle like that, often it's because there's no vision. We just keep returning to our past. It doesn't mean we're not saved, but man, we're not living the life we're supposed to be living. Man, I love God. I want to serve Him. Yeah, I haven't been to church for about a month. I'm back. I'm worshiping. You know, that cycle. It gets so tiring and so exhausting. It's from having no vision. Proverbs 29:18. This is the version of this verse that most of us are familiar with. It says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there's no vision. There's two other versions of this I want to share that maybe get more into the language we would use today. When people do not accept divine guidance, they run wild. That's what vision is. When we receive divine guidance from God, hey, here's what I want you to do with your life. Here's why I made you. Here's why you're here. This is why you're sitting in church this Sunday morning. Here's the divine guidance. Here's what I'm doing in your life. And I like this one even better. This one is from the Message. It says, if people can't see what God is doing, they stumble all over themselves. How many of you have ever had that moment in life where you feel like you're just stumbling through? If something good happens, it feels like you just stumbled on it. If we don't see what God's doing, God, what are you doing in my life? What are you doing in my family? What are you doing in my community? What are you doing in my church? What are you doing? If we don't know these things, we tend to stumble all over ourselves. We need vision in our life. You know, some people will give you the advice then, hey, just follow your heart. How many of you know that is often the worst thing we can do? How many of you have ever followed your heart into trouble? I mean, hey, just follow your heart. Our heart lies to us sometimes. You know that? Our heart will tell us the wrong thing. Our heart will lead us the wrong way. There's this verse in Jeremiah chapter 20 that I think captures what we should be following, and it's not our heart. Jeremiah 20 verse 9 says, Jeremiah speaking, His word, God's word, is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. That's like having, man, there's something there. No one can stop this. I'm not following my heart. I'm following His word that is shut up in my bones like a fire. That's what we do with vision. That's why we don't need to follow our heart. We need to follow God. We need to follow His word and follow His vision that He's given you for your life. Let me let my wife talk for a moment.
Yeah, just thinking about, you know, as we were preparing and praying for this message, and we were thinking about the last 23 years that we've been following Jesus, just when, I don't know if many of you know us or or maybe you don't know us, but when we got married very young, in high school, actually, I was still in high school, and we had already had our daughter. And so within that first 6 months, everything was falling apart in our life, and we were actually about to get a divorce. And that's when Chris, through this long story, and he can share it maybe later another time, but the small ministry came and shared the gospel with him here in Birmingham, and he just, for the first time, Jesus seemed real, and he accepted Christ. And then like a couple of months later is when God started dealing with my heart, and I accepted Christ. And so by the time that we started following God, we had made a lot of mistakes, and there was just a lot of mess in our life. And, and just as we're thinking about how our God is so kind, and he's so patient. And that's how he's been with us. And, we serve in a country where, the majority follow Islam, and their view of God is not like that. They follow him because they're scared, or if they mess up, they're going to get, in trouble, or they're going to receive this big punishment. And, and I was just thinking about how, along our journey, how God has been just so kind and so patient. Those words just keep coming, to my mind. But I remember when we first started following God, and for us, it started where he was showing us, hey, I have a plan for your life. It doesn't matter how much you messed up. I have a plan for your life. And we started to read his word and learn to pray and learning that when we pray, he'll speak back to us and learning all of this. I love it that God doesn't show us everything all at once. I was thinking, like, when we first became Christians, if God would have said, hey, Karrie, one day you're going to be living in a Muslim country, pastoring this church, and I would have been scared to death. I probably would have ran away and, changed my mind, no, that's okay. But, God knows what we can handle. And I love it that every single thing that we walk through, it's because he's preparing us for what's ahead. He's preparing us for that plan and that purpose that he has for us. And then next, after we started learning about this call and this purpose for us personally, then he started teaching us about our family. We already had our daughter right when we became Christians, and I'm still a teenager. We get pregnant again with our son, Isaiah. I remember that we had this couple that was mentoring us, and I was freaking out. We called and said, Karrie is pregnant. What are we going to do? And he was like, you're following God now. God gave you this baby. And so we started to pray and ask God, you gave us our family. You saved us and gave us a new life. We want you to give us a name for this baby. And I think we were kind of testing God, like, does he really speak? Like, is he really going to speak something to us? And I guess I was like 8 or 9 months pregnant. God gave us a name. And it was like, I was expecting this loud, audible voice. But it was like every time I saw the name Isaiah, I felt this feeling inside that I didn't even understand. And Chris and I were talking one day, and he said, do you feel like God's told you something about, the name for our baby? And I said, well, whenever I hear Isaiah, I feel something inside. But I don't really like that name, so I don't think that God's going to make me name my baby something I don't like. And he said, no, that's the name, because I feel that same thing. And Isaiah's name actually means God is salvation, and that's when he brought salvation to our family. And so he's kind of like a spiritual marker for our family. But God started to teach us about our family and our children, that we're not just a Christian family, but these children that he gave us, he has a plan and a purpose for them too. And so from a young age, we always would tell them, like, when they would ask, why can't I do this? My friends are doing it. We would always say, because you're set apart. You're not like everybody else. God has a plan for you. And so we wanted them to know that God had a plan for them. And so, and as we're teaching our family this, we go on our first short-term mission trip. And while on that mission trip, God speaks to us and says, this next step, or this next part of the vision for your life is, I'm going to send you overseas to another country one day. And I remember, just this whole process of God bringing us, through this whole waiting time until finally, of course, now you see that he did fulfill that, and we did go to Indonesia. And then, the next part after, we arrived, he was telling us, learn to live in this country, learn this language, learn these people, and learn how to raise your family and minister for me in this country. And we did that for 10 years. And then was the next step of this church that within the next, the last 4 years that we've been honored to be able to be a part of and see God working. But just to kind of give like a timeline of a part of our story of how God has, so patiently and graciously showed us one step at a time to lead us up to this point that we are today.
And when we look at Joseph's life, he was given this vision. He didn't understand all of it. I mean, he was young. How could he understand that one day he would be number 2 in command of Egypt? When he's at this time sharing this vision, and his brothers get so mad at him, they sell him into slavery. And from there, he's sent to prison. All of this, there was this process. He needed to be developed. Every single one of us, we go through processes. We're being made perfect. We go through tests in our life. How many of you have been through tests in your life? How many of you are maybe in a test right now? God's doing something. Actually, when we start to see things God's way, we start to realize that's the exciting time. Man, when something's going on in your life, you can stop for a moment and realize, wait, God's preparing me for something. Something's going on. I'm in a test. I'm being made perfect. I'm being made more into His image. He's preparing me for the next step of the vision. I mean, when we think about Joseph's life and everything he went through, could you imagine? It leads me to point number 2. Believe in the vision even when it's not visible. There was a long time in Joseph's life after having this vision that he's going to be a great leader, that his life, just looking at it from our eyes or worldly eyes, it was miserable. Slavery, prison. But when we read in Genesis 39, this is what it says when he was a slave in Potiphar's house. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. Even as a slave, the Lord was with him. God hadn't left him. And I'm going through this tough time. God must have left me. I'm going through this difficult test. I must have done something wrong. No, God was with him all the way. This was part of the preparation for the vision. We see when he's a prisoner, in Genesis 39, 20 through 21, it says, but while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. The thing is, when we look at Joseph's life, actually his vision was in phases. He was a great leader as a slave. He was already a great leader. He was already noticed. Potiphar said, hey, I want you to be in charge of my house because you are such a great leader as a slave. In the prison, they put him over that section of the prison. Hey, we want you to be in charge of the prisoners. He was already, everywhere he went, he was living out the vision. He didn't see all of it as like, man, I'll never be what God planned for me. I'll never fulfill this vision. I'm a slave. I'll never get there. I'm in prison. Everywhere it seems from what we read about Joseph, he saw this is the opportunity, and I'm going to live it right here. I'm going to be a great leader right here in this prison. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to organize the prisoners. I'm going to have them up doing yoga in the morning. We're going to do exercise. Like he had that thing. I mean, he was doing great wherever he was. I think that's one of the things for us is if we're not doing great where God's put us right now, how can he get us to that next step? If we're not doing our best here, or if we feel like, man, once I get out of this, then I'll do something. Or once this happens, we keep putting things off. When I think God gives us this vision, he says, hey, do it today. Start living it right now. Here's the vision. Start doing what I've shown you right now. I read this other quote that said, hold the vision, trust the process. Hold the vision, trust the process. Trust what God's doing in your life right now. Or if it's something bad, trust what God's allowing to happen. Trust that he's still in control. Trust that just like Joseph when he was in prison, the Lord was there. Trust that the Lord is with you no matter what you're going through right now. Hold on to the vision. Trust the process. Trust what he's doing. Many people give up in the process. I've met many people along the way that God had given them a vision, but when things got hard, they gave up. They never got there. Man, it just got hard. I don't know why it didn't look right. Being in prison couldn't have looked right to Joseph, but he never doubted that God was with him. He never doubted. He never gave up on the vision.
Talking about the process, I remember when, I told you that we felt this call. We knew that God called us to overseas missions. And so after this 10-day missions trip that we felt and we heard from God, he said, one day I'm going to have you on the mission field. We come home and we have a yard sale and we sell everything. We sold our bed, our sofa set, we sold everything. And it was actually 5 years later that we ended up making it to the mission field. And so, I think now, how God must have been, I don't know, as a parent, I love it when I see, my kids are excited about things. At that time, we were, so embarrassed, we got ahead, of course, we saw we got ahead of ourselves. But I think now, God probably just loved a heart, like that. But during that time, I was remembering this part of the process is because, so Savannah and Isaiah were little, and actually I get pregnant again with Nehemiah and our little Nemo. And I remember just feeling like this is never going to happen. God spoke to us, and we had been waiting 5 years to see this happen, and it was just not going to happen. And I remember laying in bed one night, and I'd picked out a house in Hueytown. I'd actually went to look at it and toured it 3 times. I had this notebook. I had every room, the paint color, the bedrooms for each child, because I was feeling like this is never going to happen. And moms, we get this feeling of nesting. We just want to settle down. I remember Isaiah just wanted a dog, and he just had asked for a dog for years. And we were saying, no, we're going to the mission field. After 5 years, you start feeling am I lying to this child? Am I lying to myself? And one night I'm laying in bed and I have this notebook and I'm doing my devotions and I'm in the book of Haggai. I don't even know why I'm in the book of Haggai, but I was. And this scripture God spoke to me, and he said, why do you waste your time adorning your paneled houses when my house lies in ruins? My house isn't finished yet. And it was like God was telling me, hey, I called you and I told you I have a work for you. My kingdom is not ready yet. And so it was immediately I ripped that notebook up, I threw it away, but I'm so thankful for those times, and I'm so thankful that God, our Father, is so patient, and he knows, and he knew I needed to walk through that, because, the process is really that's the biggest part for us, because if we're going to be able to handle whatever it is that God's calling you to do, you have to go through a process, and God knows that. I was remembering that when we because we lived on the island of Java from 2003 until 2009. And it was just one of the islands in Indonesia. And then in 2010, our family moves to Sumatra. That's where we are now, on the island of Sumatra in the city of Medan. And I remember when, God had already put in our heart about this church, and we moved to this island. And my kids were teenagers. Savannah was maybe in 10th or 11th grade, and it's just a hard time for kids, that age, and just to make a move on top of that is even harder. And that first term, that 3 years, was the hardest 3 years of our life. And my kids till this day they would tell you those were the worst years of my life. And I remember we were homeschooling, they were doing online school, and every morning we'd have devotion, and they would say, I hate it here. Take me home. Just send me back. Send me on a plane back home. And for a mom, it was the worst feeling. It was the worst thing to hear. And I would say, God called us here. God's gonna do something great. Although inside I was feeling I really hate it here too. It was the feeling I felt it. And I remember one morning, Chris joins our devotion, and the kids start their thing. It was in every morning, they're complaint time. And he said, I didn't call us here. God called us here. And I promise, when you leave, you're going to be so sad. You're going to miss this place. And, and so all the kids straightened up, because honestly, they knew better to even be talking like that. I even knew better, but it was just, we're human, and sometimes we feel those things. But by the end of that term, we were leaving, and God had done some things in our heart and our kids' heart, and they loved Maidon. They didn't want to leave. And I remember asking him later, like, how did you know to say that? And he was like, honestly, I was just trusting God, like, God, you better make this great for my kids. But, you know, at the end of that term, even though there was like, God did some work in our heart, I was leaving, and we always go to pray before we end our term, and we come back to get ready to go back. And I went to this time, we stayed in a hotel, just Chris and I. And honestly, I went to this time of prayer, and I was telling God that I'm done here. You know, my daughter was graduating, and I was not ready to let her go. And I was like, I've served you here, and I'm just ready to go. And in that time, God spoke and said, I want you to come back, and this next term, you plant this church. And it was so strong. And through that, you know, you just know when God speaks to you, it doesn't matter what you feel anymore, you just do it, you know. And even that year we were home, there was a process that I had to go through to really, like, clean my heart and get it in the right place. And God brought us, it's a whole other long story, but he brought us through all of these different situations and experiences. And I remember when we hit the ground on that term, when our plane hit the ground in Maidon, we looked at each other and we said, it's all or nothing. We live in a Muslim country. You know, if somebody has a problem with us, they kick us out. We go home. We're with our other kids. If not, just maybe God might move in this place and he might do something. And so all of that to say that I know that, you know, when God's maybe giving you a promise, you know, or maybe he's like, you're praying for something and you're trusting God for that promise. And sometimes it does not look at all like what you think it should look like, you know, or it doesn't even feel good. But I just want to encourage you today that hold the vision, hold that promise, because God's word is true, and what he says and what he promises, he will fulfill it. And we have to embrace that process, because God, during that time, he's building something in us. And I know, like, he was building something in me, that my faith and my trust in him, that it couldn't even have, I couldn't even be at that point had he not let me walk through that. So
yeah, in your life, there's going to be all these moments where Satan is trying to stop what God's doing, where God has put a vision in your heart, or maybe he hasn't yet, and you're going to be praying about that, and he is going to do it. And after that, Satan is going to keep trying to stop it. The enemy doesn't want you to reach that point. He wants to stop you along the way and cause you to give up. Karrie was sharing all these moments that, man, it was hard to keep going. We didn't want to be in Indonesia at times. Man, anyone having that experience of your daughter leaving home and going to college, imagine her going to the other side of the world. It's tough, but when you have that vision, you can keep moving forward. Someone said that vision gives pain a purpose. Vision gives pain a purpose. When you have a vision in your heart, all the pain you experience, the testing you're going through, the hard times, there's a purpose in it, because you know on the other side, God's already shown you what's there. God's already told you what he wants to do. You realize, hey, this is just temporary. I just got to get through this, and it's going to get better. I mean, all of us that trust God have had those experiences where things are good, it gets bad for a little bit, then it's good again. I mean, you think after a while when it's bad, we wouldn't be so worried, because we know on the other side it's good again. You know, we all go either are in a storm or about to go into a storm, or we've just come out of it. It's how life is. But Satan will try to use the storms in our life to stop God's vision. And we have to believe in the vision even when it's not visible. Joseph kept going. You know, we read the verses. And I want to speed up because we need to wrap it up here. But Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. And I added the word yet, not because I can add to the Bible. I wouldn't think that. But I believe when God's given you a vision, when he's promised you something, you will see it. Maybe not yet, but you will see it. When we see in Genesis 41, we finally see Joseph realizing the big picture that he had been promised as a teenager, the big vision. And Pharaoh says to him, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Think about that. From the teenage boy sold into slavery, put into prison, and now there he was. I wonder if he thought for a moment, man, I know he did. I know he had to think that. This is what my life was about. This is the whole purpose. This was the point of it. Everything I went through, it got me to this point. Every single one of you, God has a vision for your life. Man, those times that Karrie talked about, our team being interrogated. I think last time we were here, it had just happened. It's still on my mind. Sitting in that room being interrogated by immigration was not fun. It was a time of like, man, hey, we'll just go home. I mean, don't think sometimes missionaries don't have that thought. It'd be easier to leave this room than to face what might happen. Or times with bombings and immigration officials following us around town just to let us know that they're watching me. I turned around in the mall, maybe this was about a year ago or so. I turned around and there's this guy there from immigration, and he's like, "Hey, Chris," and I was like, "Hello, Simon." He's like, I've never seen him there before. He's like, "How's your friend from South Africa?" Like, he just wanted to make sure. He literally told me, "I noticed you had company at your house last weekend." It was just to freak us out. Who would want to live in that? But when you have vision, you can stay wherever you need to be to see that out. The third point and the final one is this: when God gives vision, you will see it with your own eyes. We've seen it. Joseph saw it. I believe people in this room have seen it. Once upon a time, Rock Creek Church of God was a vision in someone's heart. Before it sat here, it was a vision. It was a dream that someone put in someone's heart. And now we're all sitting in it. Imagine that the first people, when it was built and seeing it, wow, here's the church. And it's been a vision. It was been in my heart. Now here it is. And then all the work this church has done and all the people that have been saved in this room throughout the years, all based on a vision. And I'm sure during that time there were things that came along that tried to stop the vision. If you don't mind, I'd like to, do we have time to show our video? We'll just close with this video, and then I'll turn it over to Pastor Jonathan. But I just want you to see the church that has blown up and filled the space that you helped us create 2 years ago. God bless you guys. Thank you.
Isn't that awesome? I mean, just to think about that, had you gone home, in those hard moments and those difficult moments, that all those faces would not have been impacted by the love of Jesus Christ, and that God does something within our life. He does give us that vision. And so I want to encourage you this morning to be in prayer about what God would call you to do, how He's calling you to serve. And this morning I want us to stand up. I'm going to have Wayne come out. We're going to sing a closing song. If you'd like to respond during this song, we always want to make these altars open, and so you're welcome to come to pray. Maybe to ask God specifically. You know, there's certain moments where we just, to be able to kneel down and say, you know what, that's the moment. That's the moment where I feel like God spoke. That's the moment where I feel like I was actually willing to listen. If that's you this morning, I want to invite you to come and to pray. And as we're doing that, after this song, we're going to have a love offering taken for the Duncans. And so I'm going to ask our ushers to go ahead and take that love offering. And then after that, we're going to dismiss this morning. You'll get a chance to meet Chris and Karrie. And so let's sing this morning. Be praying about what God desires, the vision that He desires for your life. Let's sing.
Lord, I come